want the best AMD Ryzen 5 7600X PC build for gaming, but what's the best memory, motherboard, and graphics card? Don't worry, you've come to the right place. Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. While the Ryzen 5 7600X delivers amazing gaming performance, its initial launch price, along with the cost of DDR5 RAM and AM5 motherboards, made it hard to recommend. But price cuts on the Ryzen 7600X, along with falling DDR5 and motherboard prices, now make it an excellent choice for gaming builds on par with the best gaming CPU in 2022. So today we'll go over exactly what you need to know for your 7600X build, and we'll take our Ryzen 5 7600X build head to head against both the i5 13600K and Ryzen 5800X 3D. And we'll talk about when it makes sense to jump up to the Ryzen 7 7700X instead. Remember, if you get value out of the video, please give it a like as it really helps out the channel, and of course subscribe and click that bell icon, that way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. Before that, this video is sponsored by VIP SSD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows 10 licenses and that terrible Activate Windows 10 watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SSD Key, and get a Windows 10 Home or Pro OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 25% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom, you have a fully licensed Windows 10 for a crazy low price, which can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. Use the links in the video description below. The Ryzen 5 7600X is AMD's first generation of Zen 4 based Ryzen CPUs on the new AM5 motherboard platform, which uses DDR5 RAM exclusively. The 7600X is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU that has a 105-watt TDP, up from the 65-watt TDP for the Ryzen 5600X. The Ryzen 7000 CPUs are also tuned more aggressively than previous generation Ryzen CPUs and have a thermal throttle limit of 95 degrees Celsius. We'll talk more about cooling later in the video. Initially priced at $299 during its September 2022 launch, AMD quickly cut prices over the holiday shopping season, with it being found for as low as $239 at the time of this video. Check the links in the video description for current pricing. But what about performance? The great news is that the Ryzen 5 7600X does extremely well for a 6-core CPU in multi-threaded production workloads, often trading blows with the 8-core Ryzen 5800X, which sells for about the same price. And it often outpaces the i9 10900K and i9 11900K, which were Intel's 10-core flagship CPUs from 2020 and 2021. It does trade blows in production applications versus the currently $250 i5 12600K, but the i5 13600K at $320 does outcompete it, though not to the degree that non-professional users would probably even notice. But if your focus is production workloads instead of gaming, you can just go with the Ryzen 7 7700X for $340, and that closes the gap with the i5 13600K in production workloads while maintaining the gaming lead. But what about gaming performance? Well, the great news is that using increasingly affordable DDR5 RAM, the Ryzen 7600X is about 4% faster with an RTX 4090 than the i5 13600K using DDR5 6400 speed RAM, or the Ryzen 5800X 3D using fast DDR4 3600 CL16 RAM. There are a couple games where the i5 13600K or Ryzen 5800X 3D are slightly faster, but for the most part, the 7600X tops the charts in the vast majority of titles with the RTX 4090 at 1080p, 1440p, or even 4K, with the smallest differences being at 4K, where we're mostly GPU bound. If we throw in the Ryzen 7700X, it outpaces the 7600X by about 4%. The gaming performance is really only topped by the i9 13900K or i7 13700K, which are considerably more expensive, and they're not really gaming CPUs. So what's the best graphics card for the Ryzen 7600X? Usually when we're building a gaming PC, we're just looking to get the fastest GPU possible while getting a CPU that just won't bottleneck it. Given how fast CPUs have become, the minimum GPU that I would pair with a 7600X for gaming is an RTX 3080 or faster on the NVIDIA side, or a Radeon RX 6800 XT or faster GPU on the AMD side. Anything less than that, and we probably are overspending on the CPU and should instead consider something like the Ryzen 5600 for $118 right now, and invest the saved money in a faster GPU instead. From that point, there's really no maximum GPU as the Ryzen 7600X is very fast. In particular, the Ryzen 7600X will be great with the new Radeon RX 7900 XTX or RX 7900 XT, the RTX 4080, or even the RTX 4090. You can check out current GPU pricing and availability using the links in the video description below. So what's the best RAM for the Ryzen 7600X? For most builders, this is probably the hardest part of putting together a Ryzen 7600X build, given the cost, the new DDR5 technology, and unfamiliar speeds, and of course AMD's new RAM auto overclocking profile called EXPO. But the good news is, once we understand a couple of basics, it's actually pretty simple. First, let's start off with AMD's new EXPO auto overclocking profiles. They work just like Intel's XMP version in that you turn on the EXPO profile in the BIOS the very first time that you put them in, and this enables them to run at their full rated speed. But the issue is that DDR5 RAM with EXPO profiles, they're still rolling out, and they're quite expensive at the time of filming, while XMP DDR5 kits have much better pricing and availability. The good news is that XMP kits should work just fine for Ryzen 7000 motherboards, and the performance differences between XMP and EXPO kits at the same speed, they seem very tiny. So we're not really leaving any performance on the table by going with cheaper and more available XMP kits. So what speed and cache latency of DDR5 RAM are you looking for? Well, AMD recommends DDR5 6000 speed, and the kits they sent reviewers were DDR5 6000CL30. The reality is that in gaming tests with different speed kits that I've reviewed, there really isn't any more than a 3% difference between cheaper DDR5 5200CL40 RAM, like these Kingston Fury Beast modules, and the expensive DDR5 6000CL30 RAM, with the differences diminishing as we go up in resolution to 4K. And when we look at current availability, most of the faster kits with EXPO timings are for 32 gigabytes of RAM, which increases their overall cost. Remember, we only need 16 gigabytes of RAM for gaming. If we instead go with one of the recently released 2x8 gigabyte kits by Kingston, Patriot, Oloy, or Team Group, we can snag a relatively fast 5600CL36 2x8 gigabyte kit of DDR5 RAM for only about $90 US, and that price continues to fall. So my recommendation is to grab an increasingly affordable 2x8 gigabyte DDR5 kit that's rated 5200CL40 or better, and it doesn't matter whether you get XMP or EXPO timings. I'll leave a couple of good value RAM kits linked down in the video description. Now let's talk about the best motherboard for Ryzen 7600X. The new AM5 motherboard platform, it's a real selling point for many looking to buy into a platform with a future upgrade path. Now currently, AMD has committed to the AM5 motherboard socket through 2025 plus, which would likely mean at least one more generation of CPUs after Ryzen 7000, and possibly more, as AM4 platform did support 4 CPU generations. But for many builders, the new chipsets are a point of major confusion, with X670E, X670, B650E, and B650 motherboards available. Which do you need? We have a whole video going through the best motherboards for Ryzen 7000 CPUs, including the differences between the chipsets. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description if you want the full picture. But the short version is that the differences between the two chipsets, they're irrelevant to gamers or even 99% of production professionals. In fact, for a Ryzen 7600X build or Ryzen 7700X build, only thing that we really need to consider is whether we want upgraded audio on our motherboard. That is, if we're going to use the analog audio jacks on the front panel of the PC case or the rear panel of the motherboard, or maybe we don't care about upgraded audio on the motherboard because we're bypassing the motherboard audio processor using a digital connection like USB or HDMI to send the signal to a secondary device like a stereo receiver. In terms of other features like M.2 drives, VRMs, rear panel USB connectivity, even the cheapest current B650 motherboards come with more than enough for most gamers using a Ryzen 7600X or 7700X. So let's go through a couple of specific models that I would be looking for, which will all be linked down in the video description. Let's start off with motherboards with entry-level audio at the budget level. The ASRock PG Riptide B650M is a great micro ATX motherboard for only $160 right now, with a lot of connectivity, and it looks great too. Other budget options include the Gigabyte B650M UD and Aorus B650M Elite AX. If we want upgraded audio, the ASUS TUF Gaming B650 Plus Wi-Fi and B650M plus Wi-Fi start at around $230 and include an upgraded ALC 1200 audio codec. For those looking for full audio features, there is the MSI B650M Mortar and MSI Tomahawk with the ALC 4080 audio codec, as well as the Aorus Pro AX and Gigabyte Aero with the similarly performing ALC 1220 audio codec. If you're somebody who has to have an ASUS Strix board, the Strix B650A is $279 and includes Wi-Fi. And if you decide that you must have an X670E, we named the ASRock X670E Steel Legend the best one due to its comparably lower price and full feature set. Links to everything, including the best motherboard for Ryzen 7000 video, are in the video description. Now let's talk about the best CPU cooler for Ryzen 7600X. And I know this has scared a lot of people off because reviewers, they initially freaked out at the higher normal operating temperature of Ryzen 7000 CPUs. Just as AMD did with the Ryzen 5000 series, which more aggressively used cooling headroom to boost frequencies for more performance under load, Ryzen 7000 takes that even further and can push the CPU to its maximum operating temperature of 95 degrees Celsius and keep it there for as long as needed for performance. Despite some people freaking out about this, AMD assures us that the CPU is in fact designed to operate at that temperature. Now these temps are mostly seen in heavy all-core workloads, but in gaming, temperatures are often far less than that. So you can opt for one of two approaches. Either embrace the higher performance at higher temperatures, turn on Precision Boost Overdrive in the BIOS, and spend a little bit more on your CPU cooler, or just turn on Eco Mode in the BIOS and get 95% of the all-core performance and 98% of the gaming performance at lower temperatures. The one thing I would caution against, unless you consider yourself an expert, is manually undervolting your CPU using the curve offset in the BIOS. Despite some guides out there which make it seem like it's easy free performance at lower temperatures, it's very easy to introduce system instability by doing so, which can often go undetected by most users, but in fact is resulting in system crashes or even lower performance. So unless you really know what you're doing, my advice is to avoid manually undervolting and just turn on the Eco Mode if the high temps bother you. Now, whether you go full performance or Eco Mode, the minimum cooler I'd look for is a high performance tower air cooler, like the Deepcool AK400 for about $30. Now here, I would likely skip some of the budget tower air coolers that we often recommend for like the Ryzen 7600X, like the id Cooling SE214XT or Gamix 400. But I think a reasonable alternative for either situation is going for a 6 heat pipe cooler with 1 or 2 towers and fans, like the id Cooling SE226XT for $40 or the Thermalright Peerless Assassin 2 tower cooler for the same price. For those looking for the best thermal performance on air, the Deepcool AK620 and Scythe Fuma 2 Revision B for about $55 to $65 are the go-to here. For those looking to even out their temperature spikes when gaming or just bling up their system, consider a 240mm all-in-one liquid cooler like the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 for around $85 or this Gigabyte Aorus Water Force for $150. I'll leave links to these coolers and some other suggestions down in the video description. It is important to note that not all AM4 coolers are compatible with AM5 motherboards, as AMD initially claimed. The AM5 motherboard backplate, it cannot currently be removed the way that AM4 backplates could. So if your AM4 cooler requires replacing the motherboard backplate for installation, that's not going to work. One way to check this is to download the instruction manual before buying and see if they include an AMD specific backplate. Note that this is the norm for Intel motherboards, so don't get confused between the two. Many cooler companies have released specific AM5 mounting hardware to solve this issue, and some companies like Deepcool have released specific AM5 mounting hardware, even though their AM4 coolers mount just fine, as there is a very slight CPU height difference. I recommend that if an AM5 mounting hardware is available, just go ahead and grab it, even if you use the AM4 hardware to get yourself started. Finally, let's talk about PC power supplies. If you haven't seen our How to Buy a PSU 2022 guide, we cover how to size and buy the best unit for your build, based on unit quality rather than a nonsensical 80+ ratings. For a build like this, given the high-end GPUs we're considering for it, as well as the fact that many want to consider future drop-in CPU upgrades, I'd recommend getting at least a B tier or better PSU as rated on the PSU Cultist list, and sizing it at 1.5 times the max rated draw in PC Part Picker. For builds using an RTX 3080, 3080 Ti, 3090, 3090 Ti, I also recommend adding in what I call the NVIDIA tax of 100 additional watts to avoid issues from transient power spikes on high-end RTX 3000 series GPUs. Let's go ahead and do a couple of builds, a premium build and a budget build for 7600X, and we'll do some comparisons to, of course, the 5800X 3D, as well as the i5 13600K. Starting off with the budget 7600X build, you can see $674, and you're going to see that this is actually the cheapest of the three platforms. Let's quickly go through it. 7600X, we do expect the 7600 non-X to launch first quarter of 2023. We're going to probably get that announcement at CES in January 2023. It's supposed to come out for about $220 right now. This is selling for $239. It's a $19 difference, not that big a deal. It helps a little bit here and there, but if the performance for the 7600 is close enough to the 7600X, I would say just grab the cheaper of the two. We're going with a budget cooler. Remember, you can turn on eco mode if you want, or you can run something like the Deepcool AK400. It's a much beefier tower air coolers than some of the ultra budget ones we've often recommended for like the 5600X. That being said, it's only $35 and it has quite high performance. Motherboard, you have a number of different choices at the ultra budget level. I decided not to go super budget. You can get like the Gigabyte DS3H B650 motherboard. Instead, I went with the ASRock B650 MPG Riptide. Just better features, better VRMs on this. I figure spend a little bit more money if you're gonna buy into this platform, as you're gonna be able to upgrade this in the future. And it'd be nice to get at least a halfway decent motherboard, even though this only has entry-level audio on it. For the RAM, you have a number of different choices. I just went ahead and went with a $100 kit, kind of split the difference. You can find kits as cheap as $90. Actually, some of the $90 kits are some of the best, and that's the Alloy Blade. These are 2x8 gigabytes, so the 16 gigabyte total, 5600 CL36. These are really great. I would recommend this. I'm gonna leave a link to these down in the video description. These are over at Newegg, but there's a number of different kits that you can get. Anything that's 5200 CL40 or better, and don't overspend on faster memory. Remember, it's just percentage points difference. Instead, invest that money in a better graphics card. I went ahead and just added a drive and an RX 6950 XT simply for the power usage. However, I've zeroed out the cost. One of the big differences here is power, because at 1000 watts, the power supplies get substantially more expensive than 850 or 900 watt units. And you can see right here, $129, we're able to get away with something like the Fantex Amp 850 watt. Now, this is a great unit, it's A tier rated, only $129, and there's often 850 watt units. They're even cheaper. Right now, just happens to be a lot of things are sold out. So typically these range for about $100 or so. So it's a huge price savings not having to go with a higher wattage unit. $674, again, you're getting a system that is going to be super performative, whether or not you've got a 3080, a 6900 XT, or a 4090 or 7900 XTX in this thing. Really great base build. If we look at a similar 5800X 3D system, we're using budget tier motherboards, entry-level audio, all that kind of stuff. $692, about $20 more expensive. That being said, it's kind of a pick 'em one way or the other. You can definitely go with whatever you want. 7600X and 7600 build, obviously future upgradability over the 5800X 3D. And then we look at the 13600K, $750. Again, it's almost $100 more expensive than our 7600 system. That's money I would definitely put to work on a graphics card rather than investing in this particular platform, unless, and we said this in our 13600K build, I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. If you want to go this route, this is a superior workstation platform if you're very serious professional doing all kinds of production work. So if I'm looking for a slightly more premium build for a Ryzen 5 7600X or Ryzen 7600 when it does come out, what would I upgrade? Well, obviously, I think given the longevity we're expecting the platform, the first place I would look to spend a little bit more money is the motherboard. And honestly, take a look at our best motherboards for Ryzen 7000 series video. We go through all the boards. That being said, spoiler alert, really the only feature that you're reaching up for that has any value to me is the audio. All the boards at the budget level come with plenty of connectivity. They come with plenty of pretty much everything except audio. So I would look for something like the ASUS TUF Gaming B650 plus Wi-Fi. It's got an ALC 1200 audio codec. It's not the best, but it's still very, very improved over those entry-level ALC 897 units. This is going for $239 right now. You can, of course, reach up to something like the Tomahawk B650. There's a several gigabyte B650, the Pro, as well as the Aero that are good ones to grab for about $270-ish. Even the ROG Strix motherboards are sub $300. So a lot of good choices out there if you want to grab a slightly better motherboard. And then the other thing I would upgrade, I would just go with a beefier cooler. I'd go with the Thermalright Peerless Assassin. This is a great 2-tower cooler, but this is what you're looking for, basically. A beefier tower air cooler. You can go up to the Deepcool AK620 instead if you'd like. This one's $40 for the Peerless Assassin. You can look at the side of Fuma 2. That's about $55 to $60. You can look at getting a higher performance 240 millimeter all-in-one liquid cooler as well. It's another place I go, especially when I add a little bit of bling to the system. So overall, with our premiumized system, we've got $751. Not that much more money to spend, and I think we are getting better overall gaming performance. So then taking a look at our comparison system, the Ryzen 7800X 3D, really the only thing I think you need to upgrade at this point is the motherboard to get better audio, better features on it. So we're gonna go up to that $170-ish class of motherboards. You can often find them a little bit cheaper. This is like the Aorus Elite, this is like the Tough Plus, the ROG Strix motherboards, MSI Tomahawk, etc. All total, $783, not that much more expensive than the 7600X. That being said, again, we're considering this probably no future upgrades to the 5800X 3D AM4 platform, likely upgrades on the AM5 platform. And then actually the 13600K gets a little bit more competitive once we go to a more premium system, because Z690 motherboards with premium features are still out there at good prices. In this case, we're using the ASRock Z690 Extreme Wi-Fi for less than $200. This is a great motherboard, but really the rest of the package is the same, $805. So this is where things do get a little bit closer. That being said, again, a dead platform, quote unquote, you probably use this for the next 5 years, but not going to be upgradable in the same way that the Ryzen 7600X system would be upgradable right now. Final thoughts? Listen, 7600X or the 7600, when it does release, great CPUs to build with right now, given the falling DDR5 prices and the falling prices of B650 motherboards. Absolutely fantastic combination right now. I think it does beat out the 5800X 3D. That being said, if you want to build that one, that's fine too. We've got a video for that on the channel. Same with the 13600K. I think they're all close enough that you have options and you can decide what's going to work best for you. If what's really important to you is having a platform right now that'll run the fastest graphics cards at 95 to 99% of their GPU capacity, at the same time giving you that future upgradability, then I think the 7600X is a fantastic system to build. Remember, if you got value out of the video, give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Now, if you're looking for the best 1440p gaming monitors to go with your 7600X gaming build, check out this video right here. We go through all the best 1440p gaming monitors, including the new OLED ones, and we'll catch you on the next one.